Hello, I'm back again and I'm going to do the big book phobia tag. This, I just saw that Steve from Steve Reads Books has done it, and I went back and looked at the original one, the original tag, which was created by Liz's Books Buffet. I don't think this is really an appropriate tag for me because it's no secret that I love big books, but there are quite a few on my shelves that have been haunting me, or that I've kind of been meaning to read but haven't actually started yet for whatever reason. Interestingly, I actually found it quite hard to find small books less than 300 pages. I've got 5, but I think I found about 7. That's pretty much it, and some of them were like 300 and a bit anyway. So I don't know what that says about me, that I'm a dick, that I am a glutton for punishment, or a snob, or I don't even know. Anyway, so the point of this tag is to explain 5 big books, big being 500 plus pages, and explain why you haven't read them yet, why they're kind of, you have big book phobia about them, I suppose, and then 5 shorter books and what you liked most about them, and alternate big and small. Nobody tagged me again because I've never been tagged in anything that I know of, but whatever, I don't care. Anyway, I'm going to start with a big book. This one is called Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. This book won the Man Booker in 2009, and I know that everybody has loved it. I started reading it and I could not get into it. I've actually started, I think, maybe 3 times, and I just can't get past the first 50 pages. I don't know what it is. It's not that it's boring. I don't know. I just can't. I'm not interested. I don't know if I'm even going to try again, or if I'm just going to give it away so that I don't keep seeing it on my shelf and feeling bad. I don't know, but I'm sure it's good. Maybe just not for me. I'm not really sure. The first small book, let's do this one. Okay, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. This is one of the first sci-fi books that I ever read, and it is so good. It's really great. It's actually part of a series. This is the first one in the series, and it's being made, or has been made, into a movie. I think it actually may have already come out, and I may have just missed it. But it is really good. I'm not going to really say too much about it because I don't think that's the point of this video, and I tend to blab. So anyway, it's a really great, if you read this, you can then read the second book called Speak for the Dead, which is one of my favourite books of all time. It's so good. It's such a great book. The second big book that I haven't read, let's go, okay, Oliver Twist, by Charles Dickens, obviously. I haven't read any Charles Dickens. I bought this intending to read it, and I think I read about 40 pages, and I liked it, but I think I'm intimidated by it just because it's Dickens. And as a child, I think I tried to read Great Expectations when I was like 11 or 12. Yeah, and ever since then I've just had a phobia about them, and I haven't really tried. And I think the phobia kind of overtakes. It's one of those irrational things, probably. So I do intend to read this and other Dickens, but I just haven't yet, and I'm not sure when I will. One day. The second small book is called No One Belongs Here More Than You by Miranda July, which is a book of short stories, and it's a really beautiful, fun little book. It's also, I just saw the back of it again. She's absolutely gorgeous. Oops, let me go look at her. Oh, you can't really see that properly. Anyway, these books the stories are funny, and they're kind of profound. Like, I found myself reading them going, you know, when you read something, you just want to tell everyone what you just read because it was so good, or such a great little insight into something. And I was just reading it thinking, oh my god, I know exactly, that is me, or, you know, I just kind of really identified with it. It's a totally hipster book, but whatever. I think Miranda July had this kind of big fame thing. She kind of was like a little famous darling for a couple of years ago. So I don't know if that's because of the writing, or I know she had a movie or two. I'm not sure what the deal was, but anyway, everyone loved her for a while, and I actually think it's really well deserved because this is a great little book. The next big book is called The Slave Trade, A History of the Atlantic Slave Trade 1440 to 1870. This is a hefty tome, which clocks in at about 100 and something pages of footnotes and like 800 and something. I bought this in a secondhand bookshop that's now closed down years ago when I was in high school, and obviously I had delusions of grandeur about reading this at that time. I really want to. It's something that I really am really interested in, and I actually went to Zanzibar a couple of years, in about 2007 I think it was, and Zanzibar is one of the last trading slave trade outposts of the world, and it's kind of, part of it is almost a museum of the slave trade and a memorial to many of the hundreds of thousands of millions probably of people who were trafficked and went through Zanzibar on their way to other places. And I kind of feel like I have a really superficial understanding of it, and that it's kind of a forgotten part of history, particularly in my part of the world. So I would really like to know more, and I do intend to read this book. I find that I read non-fiction books more at home, and most of my reading these days is done on the tram going to and from work and at lunchtime, because I've been studying and working full-time and then studying full and part-time over the last few years, and I just haven't had the kind of brain power or capacity or time really to sit down and devote hours at a time to something like this. And I don't think these are the kind of books that you can just kind of read 20 minutes of at a time. It's not like a novel, obviously. So I'm kind of scared of it, but it's more that I just haven't had the right time come along, I think. The next one I'm going to include because this is an Australian book, and I'm not sure that it really has got much popularity outside Australia again. Excuse me, my nose is running. Sorry. It's called The Burial, and it's by, who's it by? Courtney Collins. I think it came out last year. It's relatively recent, and I didn't love it that much, but I think it's a great story. It is based on a true story of this female outlaw, and it's told from the perspective of her dead child, which sounds extremely morbid, and it is, but it's set in 1921, there we go, and this woman actually kills her child soon after it's born, basically as an act of mercy, because her life is so terrible and life is so hard for a woman in that time, and her, I mean, she's basically an unmarried, I don't know what you would call her, she's worked as like a cattle stealer and in a circus, and she kind of has a very unstable life. Being a single woman alone in essentially the outback is just not, it's terrible. So it's the story of Jessie, who is the woman, and basically her life. It's really hard. It's harsh. I mean, the Australian, I suppose, territory is a really harsh place. Just, it's fine now. I mean, it's, essentially there's great cities and all sorts of things. But the outback's a bloody harsh place, even if you're equipped with, supplies and all sorts of things. And back then, it was just even, unimaginable. So it's a really good book. It's horrible. The way that she is abused and mistreated, and it's hard to read at points, but it's a really good book, I think. Yeah. I've forgotten what I'm up to now. I think I have two more big books. This book is a book I've been intending to read for years. It's non-fiction again. It's called The End of Certainty, by Paul Kelly, who's an Australian political writer, journalist man. And this was a really, I suppose, important book. It's a really great summary of Australian politics through the kind of 80s, 90s. Oh, the 80s this one is. There's another one that came after this, which is kind of 90s, 2000s. I don't really have that much of an understanding of this era of politics. Obviously, I was born in 86, so this is kind of the 80s. But my family were quite, I suppose, always talked about politics over the dinner table and things like that. And I would absolutely love to know more about this period of Australian history, but I just haven't had the time or inclination really to actually start. It's one of those books I wish I'd already read so I knew it all about it rather than having to actually go through the process. But which makes it sound like reading's a chore. It's absolutely not a chore to me, but there've been more books that I've picked up instead of this one over the last little while. The next small book, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this book. It's On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I think everyone's probably read this. I read this when I was about 16 or something, and I absolutely loved it, and I felt I loved it with my soul. Like, it's one of those books that I read just at the right time. I started to reread it again a few years ago, and I just couldn't. It made me just want to vomit because I thought it was just so pretentious. It's a book of its time, and it kind of tends to get glorified, I think, and I think it means a lot to people when they read it when they're in their kind of late teens, early 20s, but it's just a bit, I don't know, the beat thing's kind of been a bit overdone, I think. Like, there's this kind of resurgence of wanting to be like the Beats, and I just find it a little bit... Anyway, but it was a really good book, and it kind of, yeah. The last big book, Seven Pillars of Wisdom. I've read 128 pages. I took this to Japan with me when we went a couple of years ago, and I just couldn't get into it. I found the first kind of few pages, like 10 or 20, really great, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be the book that I read on my holiday, and I just found myself not wanting to read it all, and I just was staring at it thinking, ugh. So maybe this doesn't actually fit into this tag, because it's a book that I just couldn't really read. I don't see myself ever going back to it rather than a big book that I'm scared of, but anyway, there you go. And the last book, I was trying to decide between two, actually. Well, okay. So the first one is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, just because I absolutely love this book. I reread it late last year after having read it in high school as well, and it is just even better the second time around, I think. I'm sure that many people have read it. I imagine that this is the kind of book that's put on every high school reading list. If it's not, it should be. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. Obviously, well, yeah, I think everybody knows the story. There's not really much more to say. The other one that I was going to talk about is He Died with a Falafel in His Hand by John Birmingham, who is an Australian author as well. It's a bit of a theme going on here. And it was made into a movie, which I think was terrible. I think it's the kind of book that it is so much better when you read it. John Birmingham is a columnist, and he's got a few books, and this one I think is what launched his career really, as a writer anyway, and it is just hilarious. It kind of tells a story of share houses in, I guess, the 70s and maybe 80s around Melbourne and Sydney, or maybe it's just Sydney, I can't remember, but it kind of talks about the characters, the bizarre freaks, creeps, drug addicts, I don't know, travellers that he lived with at various points in various share houses, and the kind of absolute bizarre antics that they got up to, and it is really funny. When I read it, I still was living at home, and I kind of expected, or, wanted to move out and enter this bizarre world where you live with all these creeps, but thank God I didn't. I've lived with some absolute idiots in the share houses that I've lived in, and I am so glad that those days are over. But it is a really funny book, and it's a quick read. It's quite short. It's 213 pages, and you can read it in a sitting. It's hilarious. And I think that's all. So that was fun. I like doing tags. I wish I could just do tags forever, but I can't find that many that I want to do. I don't know. I need to look through and find more, I think. Anyway, I think that's all. I'm going to America and the UK on Thursday, so I may not see you for a little while, but I also wanted to say thank you so much to Steve from Steve Reads and Liz from Liz Loves Literature. because they gave me a shout out a couple of weeks ago, and I think I forgot to even acknowledge that. Thank you so much, guys. It absolutely means so much, and I don't know, it's basically solely because of you that I have subscribers. And welcome and thank you to all my subscribers as well. I can't believe that people are actually subscribing and listening to me rant and rave about books and swear, but thank you. It's great, and I think everybody should make videos. A lot of the people who've subscribed don't have videos, so you should start. It's really fun. Join the community. Anyway, thanks. Bye.